Thank you for joining us on More Than That, a podcast where we dive a little bit deeper into what was preached on Sunday morning. We hope that this is enriching to your walk with Christ and that you love God and people that much more so that we can extend the glory of God to the people He has placed in our lives. So buckle up and enjoy the conversation. Hey, church, welcome back to More Than That. This week, we are remote. Raphael is in Virginia at Grimke Seminary, so there's a little bit of, just a little tiny bit of distance between the two of us, rather than sitting right next to each other. Raphael, you had this week's sermon passage, which was John 6:16 through 21, and this is the first time that the disciples see Jesus walk on water in the Sea of Galilee, and this seems like such a small little passage that it's almost like there's not a whole lot there that we can unpack, but did a really good job of bringing out some of the things that were not as clear upon first reading. Things like just the fact that Jesus silences all of the fear that surrounds us, and that Jesus demands our full reception. And when we do that, that's when that fear ends up becoming silenced. So if you were to have an extra set of, maybe not an extra set, but an extra 10 minutes or so to take the church down a separate rabbit trail, or maybe expand our view of something that you already brought up during the sermon, what would you have said?
Just obviously to make clear a little bit more the Narnia kind of analogy that I used. Obviously, Aslan is not getting bigger. It's actually Lucy's perception that's getting, like, she's getting, like, to see her capacity to perceive its greatness grows as she matures. And so, basically then it's really like, it's kind of seeing that, like, we find Jesus bigger and bigger. Not that he's growing, he's infinite and unchanging, and we're the ones whose eyes are being opened. And so, really, at the end of the day, like, so Jesus is not growing. Our blindness is what's shrinking, right? Jesus not growing, our blindness is what's shrinking. So every season of life, every storm, every moment of receiving him strips away another layer of our small, maybe customized version of him. And we begin to see what was always true. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. Like, and so then the Word became flesh. The um, you know, like, at the end of the day, the disciples are not getting a bigger Jesus. Their eyes are being opened to who he truly really is, who he really is. I just wanted to make sure that, like, at least, like, that was not confused, that I'm like saying Jesus getting bigger. And in fact, when we think about magnifying something, we always have to be thinking about just either you're looking at a microscope that takes a microscope takes something that's small and makes it bigger,
Mm-hmm.
or you can look through a telescope. A telescope takes something that's big and
Mm-hmm.
brings it near to you, right? Like, it takes something that's like, so when you look into a telescope, the moon is already too big, but, like, it's already big, but our telescope kind of brings something that's big. So that's magnification in two different ways. Ours is not a microscopic view of Jesus. It's a telescopic view of Jesus. We're still discovering, like the Hubble telescope, we're still discovering how big Jesus is, but they're seeing him as he is. And so when they see him walking on water, they recognize this is only something that God only can do, which is what Job chapter 9 verse 8 says. I don't know if you look with me to Job chapter 9 verse 8, when Job is talking about God, he basically just said, and this is what makes it bring a picture a little bit more clearly, because it is only here that you hear. This is Job's reply to Bildad in verse 8. In verse 7, it says that um, he who commands the sun and it does not shine, and seals up the stars, he alone spreads out the heavens and treads on waves of the sea, right? And then it's just going to call it and talk about he makes the stars, he makes all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just a way in which, if they're well acquainted with all that, they're realizing this is only God alone.
Mm-hmm.
So the I am statement and the act of walking on water, two witnesses saying the same thing simultaneously, that this is really truly God, right? That this is truly God. So yeah, and when it came to what was the one thing that I wanted to even just like say is that there's nothing wrong with rowing. There's nothing wrong with rowing, right?
Yeah.
They still had to row.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing was wrong with that. They still had to row because that was the most responsible thing to do. The problem would have been if they trusted only in their rowing and
Yeah.
receive Jesus and refused to receive Jesus into that rowing. Um, you know, ceasing from striving usually doesn't mean ceasing from effort,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we just have to kind of look at it like where it's like it means ceasing to make your efforts the foundation of your security,
Mm-hmm.
and then really then just like and 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 where the difference is internal. Are you rowing in fear and self-reliance, or are you rowing while remaining open to the intervention of
Mm-hmm.
the Lord? And so that's just kind of like looking at that. The the other thing that I realized, I was just kind of like, I wanted to make sure that at least is just is so apparent in this passage, is that the disciples belong to Jesus, but they still find themselves in the storm. And so, like, they're not in the storm because of lack of faith or sin, or, you know, they are there because, um, this passage doesn't mention that Jesus sends them, but at least they are there because they're having to advance. So the storm is not like it's this storm basically just shows us that even as believers, we can belong to Him. That, following Him is not a guarantee of calm waters. It's a guarantee of His presence in the water. And that's one of the reasons why I said um, His presence makes a difference, changes everything without everything changing yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, so the storm is actually the context that Jesus uses to reveal Himself more deeply, and they get to grow a little bit more. And so they needed the storm to receive the revelation of this is Jesus. So we need
Mm-hmm.
to also look at our storms and ask ourselves, like, what is God wanting to reveal of Himself in the midst of all our storms? If the sea had been calm, they never would have seen Him walk on water, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it just makes us understand that suffering in the Christian life is often not a punishment, but the very setting God uses to show Himself even bigger, so we can see Him a lot more clearly.
Mm-hmm.
So suffering is not a detour from discipleship. It's actually it's still part of discipleship,
Yes.
even in that moment. The last thing I was gonna say was um, the revealing of himself to disciples in private is so important versus like it's so important here because the crowd wanted what Jesus could just only produce, which is bread, political freedom, national identity, and all that stuff.
Hmm.
Their category of him was he can be very useful to us, right? He can be very useful to us. For them, like his revelation of his divine nature would have been casting pearls to swine, basically. So when you're looking at this, like it's not that they're bad people, but they're not fully ready to receive all that he is.
Yeah.
But the disciples, on the other hand, they've been walking with him. They have been in relationship with him. Um, basically, at the end of the day, their fear when they see him walking on water is they're sensing the weightiness of who is this, and basically at the end of the day, like you're seeing them being in awe of him, and then basically just like their relationship grows more and more. These are the ones that are going to be his witnesses. They're going to be apostles. They're going to be, so he has to, he wants them to be witnesses of these things. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, so it just some things that I thought were important to wrestle with in this text. But otherwise, I don't know if you have any questions for me.
There were no questions this week that I am aware of, that
Okay.
were at least sent in. But what's interesting though is as you were bringing up the suffering and things like that, it got me thinking about just the different ways to make sense of this problem that we call evil in the world.
Yeah.
And this kind of stems back to Irenaeus of Lyon, where some people call it the soul building, some people call it soul making, where it's a development type of allowance of evil. So God allows evil, Jesus allows evil things to happen to people, especially those who are part of his family, so that we can be made even more like Jesus at the whenever we come out on the other side. So it's really of a spiritual and Christian formation that's what's going on, at least from my perspective as the apologist. This is what's going on. Like Jesus is allowing these things to happen so that their intention or their heart posture is striving towards him while they're still putting in the effort to get to shore.
Yeah.
So they're
Yeah.
working to get themselves out of this while having their eyes fully set on Jesus. And all the while this is like, hey, later on as you are going to be facing, like in Stephen's case, stoning, as you're facing being stoned, like the effort that you got to put forward is a lot to be able to like keep yourself going and not give up and make sure that
Yeah.
you don't recant your faith or renounce your faith, but that you keep your eyes completely on me. So this is a preparatory type of event that you're in right now. But the other thing that I was thinking is that we're the ones changing. And whenever we're looking at the magnification that you brought up, we are the ones that are changing in our relationship with God. And that is why God continually becomes bigger and bigger and bigger the closer we grow to him. So it sounded like you were about ready to say something.
No, 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 definitely. I was going to say that we are the ones who are changing. Ultimately, scripture says there's no weapon formed against us that will prosper,
Hmm.
but yet, obviously, it doesn't mean that like those weapons don't sometimes leave us with a bruise.
Yeah, it doesn't mean they don't hurt.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that like they're just gonna bounce off.
Hmm.
But in the midst of it all, no matter how much Satan probably try to destroy the saints, um, it always, God finds a way to still make it work
Mm-hmm.
towards revealing himself even more.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're just things like, for example, in the case of Job, there's just allowing, um, is
Yeah.
allowing Satan to tempt him. But yet
Yeah.
at the same
Yeah.
time, God has already made a declaration. Did you see my servant Job? He is
Mm-hmm.
more faithful. So there's just that aspect of, um, you see that, but yet it's just so beautiful because God always
Mm-hmm.
employs that to make us more and more like Him.
Yeah. And I mean, that was another thing that that I had written down here just as a note to bring up, but that it was not for the lack of faith of Job or the disciples. It's because they had faith that they were being tested.
Yeah,
And that's one of the things, like if you read Job, then you're going to see that all of his friends are like, "Oh, it's because you've done something, or you're lacking faith. You're doing you know something XYZ is wrong with you." And then in
yeah,
the beginning, that's stuff that they're not privy to, and we see that God is praising Job for his faith, not
yeah,
condemning him for lack of it. And that's
yeah,
so it's
yeah,
he's being tested because of his faith. So one of the other things and this is geographical, um, and maybe I just had a question personally.
yeah.
Why is it called the Sea of Galilee when it's like the size of a lake? Because like it is right next to the I don't exactly know what sea is like. It's like looks like 6 to 10 miles to the west. There's this massive body of water, and then there's little itty bitty Sea of Galilee.
Hey, I
Do you
that's
know? Like,
no. I just know that like later on it was called the Sea of Tiberias, right?
hmm
Just simply because of like later on, Tiberius when he renames it,
hmm
which kind of just shows you that maybe John was written a little bit later,
hmm
when it was renamed, but everyone still referred it to the sea as the Sea of Galilee. But
hmm
the other stuff, yeah, I
I
know,
was like, I
yeah,
want because I was curious and just the geographical sense of is there I guess why would the winds be so crazy there? And so I was like, okay, so it's kind of relatively close to that bigger body of water, and sometimes there's just winds that come off of that.
yeah.
And maybe there's a valley there, maybe it kind of looks like it, but
Yeah, there is actually, if I was able to look at I had in my notes that basically like this was a valley all right, let me see.
mhm.
I
Well, I
had
mean,
in my notes that this valley basically like it's in between, like it's almost like, there are mountains
mhm,
in between, and so they say that like basically like at night basically the wind would always arise, and in fact when they're rowing, they're actually rowing into headwinds
mhm,
versus like, because like the wind would actually just like, they're rowing against the wind, and then because they're like in between in a valley of some sort, then the
mhm.
waters kind of almost just get agitated even more and more.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what, if probably if the waves just carried them, and probably they would end up having to basically just dash against, like, let's say the rocks or something like that. So they had to keep on rowing and
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's also experienced fishermen too.
Mhm.
They've done this, but you can see they're terrified a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's just one of those questions that we're not gonna have answered. Maybe somebody
Well,
has answered, like,
maybe we'll.
why they were scared. I don't know if we're gonna know because I mean, like you said, they're experienced fishermen. They knew exactly how this boat was going to react as they look at the waves. They know exactly what that wave is going to do to the boat, and yet they were still afraid. And maybe that's something that we can draw out too. Like even the most experienced of us can still experience fear. in
Oh yeah,
something that
definitely.
we are trained and well trained in. Like I listen or watch some baseball and follow some baseball people on social media. I've faced, 70, 80 mile an hour fastballs before. And, they're experienced and professionals at it. I can only imagine what it's like, 90, 105 mile an hour fastballs. As soon as when you see that curveball come in, that I'm curious if there's a sense of fear that they have to overcome in order to maintain calm and, sitting and waiting on that ball to break
Yeah,
versus
yeah.
jumping out of the box. Like there's that experience there, but I'm curious, and I've never met a professional baseball player to ask them like, "Hey, whenever you see this curveball coming, are you afraid that it's not going to break?" Because it's some of them their cuts are like 2-3 feet, and you're looking at a ball that's coming for your head, and if that ball doesn't break, it's going to smack you.
I'm sure if there's always like a reputation of like, listen, this is dangerous. I'm sure like there's always that aspect
Hmm.
of fear. But you can also see that like probably the disciples were waiting for Jesus.
Hmm.
They thought, okay, he's gonna come, and so they end up leaving later than they want to. But in the midst of all that, I think when we come back now to um, storms, life, whatever it is, it's just the whole idea that like, who is it that is with us?
Hmm.
Like I think we have to do, and we have to kind of keep on doing some of this homework. Who is it? Who is it that's with us?
Hmm.
If it's the great I am, and we're going back to how God reveals Himself and all that, um, the waves and all those things might be saying what they're saying, but we have to now like just probably like the disciples fear Him more than we fear whatever is around us.
Hmm.
So when we fear Him, not the fear of being scared, but the fear of reverence,
Hmm.
it changes everything there.
It does. And just like rereading that passage, it's almost like they're like, yeah, we have to get to this place. We'll meet Jesus there. Like we got to go. Like because we know exactly how long it's going to take us to cross Galilee. So we got to leave. He's Jesus. He'll figure it out. That's almost the sense that I'm getting from rereading that. Like we got to
Yeah,
go, guys. Like we can't make this journey in the time that we got. We might
yeah.
be a little late, and that's okay, but we still gotta go.
And I have a feeling that probably like their home base was on this side.
Mhm.
They were probably saying, okay, if he's staying up the mountain the whole night, we'll come back and pick him up tomorrow. You know, we need to
Yeah.
go back to our supplies or whatever it is. So, yeah,
Yeah, so
it's a great passage.
it is, and personally, I was very surprised at how much was packed into this little bit. I mean, I'm familiar with the I am statements and things like that relating to the deity of Jesus, but this specific passage, I never just sat down and
Yeah,
just, like, stayed with for more than just reading through it or noticing,
yeah,
hey, here's an I am statement. So that was nice to just slow down and just not gloss over this, because this is not the one. This isn't the one where that was more significant in terms of the typical Bible stories that we're told. Because this one, he doesn't calm anything; he just gets them to where they're going.
yeah, yeah. Which is also just like, the beauty of it as well. I think I put it down here, like where it's like verse 21, kind of just like it's like, you know, Does Jesus supernaturally transport the boat in a similar way that he transported Philip in Acts chapter 8? Because it says they immediately arrived. Or was it a
Mm-hmm.
compression of time, that they're caught up in awe and just didn't notice how quickly they arrived?
Yeah.
Or is John making a literal point? When you receive Jesus, receiving Jesus always what? Leads to arrival,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So it's and I think obviously like it's just that's now like where we go and um you look at Psalm 107, which was a passage that like I wanted to take some time to read that. But here you're getting to see in that passage, you know, it says this about God, that some traveled on in ships and carried cargo over the vast waters. They witnessed the acts of the Lord, the amazing feats of the deep water. He gave the order of a windstorm and stirred up the waves of the sea.
Mm-hmm.
They reached up to the sky and then they dropped to the depths. The sailors' strength left them because the danger was so great. They swayed and they staggered like drunks, and their skill proved ineffective. I love that. Their skill proved ineffective. They cried out to the Lord in their distress. He delivered them from their troubles. He calmed the storms, and then the waves grew silent. The sailors rejoiced because the waves grew quiet, and he led them to the harbor they desired. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his loyal love, for the amazing things he has done for the people. So this just also as well, like just kind of shows you just a beautiful picture of what this is also a picture of.
Mm-hmm.
Psalm 107 says, "Let the redeemed of the Lord say so." And here we're seeing also just a picture of what does redemption look like, especially like man, they're going up and they're going down. Um, they're being swayed and staggered like drunks, and their skill proves ineffective. And that's now like where it's like, is it just only skill alone, or sort of, yeah,
Yeah. Well, and I think you hit it a little bit whenever you talked about darkness during the sermon, because
yeah,
it's a multi-layered, multifaceted concept that John's playing with here. And
mm,
when it comes to verse 21 and that time frame, it wouldn't surprise me if John was like, it just seemed like it was immediate to them. And I'm going to use that language, that metaphor to get to like also drive home this point of, yeah, like once we receive Jesus, we get to where we are meant to be.
yeah,
So it wouldn't surprise me if John had that in the back of his mind, like, okay, this fits really well, and
yeah,
I can
yeah.
get multiple things across by using this. Because I mean, when you think about it, John's gospel is very different from the rest of them,
Yeah.
and that's why it's not part of the synoptics. But also, I feel like there's a lot more literary things going on in John as compared to Matthew, Mark, and Luke, which are largely historical. And not saying that John's not historical or that he's not recounting real history, he is, but there's a little, it seems like there's a little bit more literary things that John is using in order to get at certain points about the person of Jesus.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Yeah, that's now like where really I wrote it down like this here, that practically we can still go to work, seek treatment, still make a call, but hold on to those efforts loosely, knowing your arrival depends on him, not your strength.
Mm-hmm.
Like so just really then it's just knowing and trusting him that he's the one who's going to make arrival actually happen,
Mm-hmm.
because practically we're really depending on him.
Mm-hmm.
And I like what you're saying there, like to receive him is to arrive. And I think that could really just be a Christian discipleship on its own.
Mm-hmm.
To receive him is to arrive, meaning that like then you've arrived. You don't need, there's nothing else that should compete
Mm-hmm.
for his place once you've received him. Yeah, so yeah, this was a very good one. I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking forward to like here in a couple of weeks when we jump back into to John 6.
Yeah, yeah, I am as well. I know you have students coming in a few minutes because you're, like I said
Mm-hmm.
at the beginning, you're at Grimkey and you're teaching a course there. So, Raphael, thank you for bringing the sermon on Sunday, and I just want to remind you all that this conversation is just that. It's a conversation. It's not a replacement for the sermon that this conversation is about. And if you are watching this on YouTube, please go listen to the sermon. It's going to make so much more sense. And you're going to find that in the Here Is Your King playlist. So you can go to the playlist tab, find Here's Your King, and it's going to be, I think it's the fifth sign. Um, and if you are listening to this on the podcast, you have a little bit of an easier role. You can just hit the reverse button a few times, and you're going to end up finding the podcast with the sermon relating to this conversation. So, Raphael, thank you so much for taking some time out of your teaching day to sit down and hammer this conversation out, because I was looking forward to it, because I wanted to get some more of those little tidbits out of you, because I knew that there was going to be more.
Yeah, yeah.
It always seems like the smaller the passage, the more that we have to say about it. So thank you for taking the time and for everything that you do for the church, for the students at Grimkey, and for our area. And guys, we will see you all next week. God bless.
See you guys next week. Thank you.